is in charge of no-deal planning for this government. Good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Justin.
Did you do something wrong when you prorogued Parliament?
I don't believe so, but we respect the judgment of the Supreme Court, and we will, of course, comply with that judgment. I think it's only fair to point out that there's a very respectable set of legal opinions that have pointed out that, according to understanding of the law, until now, what the government did was entirely lawful. So Jonathan Sumption, former Justice of the Supreme Court, was on your programme earlier. He said that he would have given the same advice that the Attorney General did, that this was a lawful decision. And it was also the case that in the High Court, we had the Lord Chief Justice, the Master of the Rolls, and the President of the Queen's Bench Division, three of the most senior judges in this country, who concluded that the government's decision was lawful. Now, of course, the Supreme Court has taken a different view, and I think it's all important that we reflect on that judgment and on its consequences.
It's not just a matter of taking a different view, is it? The Supreme Court has ruled that what you did was unlawful, void, and of no effect. And what you're saying this morning to a lot of people, including a lot of Conservatives, just does not grasp the gravity of that.
Well, I absolutely appreciate the gravity of that. The Supreme Court, as again,
what
Lord
they were
Sumption,
saying is that you were wrong, and you are refusing to accept what they are saying.
No, certainly not. I entirely accept what they're saying.
So do you accept that you were wrong?
I accept that the Supreme Court has made this judgment, and they have decided that in very clear and unambiguous...
Not that they've made the judgment. Do you accept that what you did was unlawful and wrong?
I'll thank you again, Justin, for giving me the opportunity to explain the government's position. The government's position...
No, but with respect, I don't want you to explain the government. I just want you to...
You don't want me... If you don't want me to explain the government's position, why invite me on the programme?
You can come and you can explain it in a second. I want you to focus on what has happened when a Supreme Court... criticises a government in the trenchant terms that it has done, and your lack of humility, really, in your response to it. So behind the scenes, you've got advisors saying that the government has made that the court has made a serious mistake in extending their reach into these political matters, and now you in public saying, in effect, well, it's just a matter of opinion. Other judges think other things.
No, I didn't say that. And let me be quite clear. I absolutely respect the integrity of the Supreme Court. I respect the judgment. The government will comply with it. That is the law. It is also the case that the principle of judicial review is a well-understood one. It has often been the case that government ministers have taken actions which they believed were right, and then the courts, whether it's been the High Court or other courts, have said, actually, do you know what? On this occasion, your exercise of your executive power or your prerogative power was wrong. And in all of those cases, the government, with proper respect for the rule of law, has undertaken to make sure that we put things right.
Do you believe the court did make a serious mistake and has gone into matters that it shouldn't have gone into? Is that the view of the government, the public view of the government?
No, I think that it's absolutely right that the Supreme Court should take a view on a matter of this kind. It was done in absolutely the proper way. But I'm just contextualising things because I think it's important to stress that while the Supreme Court was clear, there is respectable legal opinion that disagrees with that view. And it's perfectly possible in a democracy to say that you respect a judgment and that you will comply with a judgment. But you also note that there are a range of views about the appropriateness of a particular course of action. I'm not criticising the Supreme Court. I would not criticise the Supreme Court, even though I disagree with that position. I'm simply pointing out that both in England and in Scotland, very senior judges took the view that this was lawful.
But was this or was it not a constitutional coup, as we understand Jacob Rees-Mogg described it?
No, I think that there's been a lot of garbled commentary in the newspapers today, which attributes to people a variety of different views. I'm here on behalf of the government, and as I hope you can now fairly reflect, far from showing anything other than respect for this judgment, I am absolutely clear that all of us should take the opportunity to read and reflect on the judgment, and it's perfectly possible to disagree with some of the reasoning, but at the same time to respect the rule of law and to say that when the Supreme Court rules on a matter like this, of course we have to obey these principles. Of course we adhere to the rule of law. And when the Supreme Court, as you quite rightly pointed out, is unanimous on a point like this, then it's important that all of us take time to reflect on that judgment, its consequences for all of us.
What have you gained from proroguing Parliament?
Well, again, Parliament, as the Supreme Court pointed out in its judgment, hasn't been prorogued. That's why we're meeting again today. But
what did you gain from the effort?
Well, one of the things we wanted to do is to make sure that we could bring forward a Queen's speech with a strong domestic agenda. And again, one of the reasons...
which you haven't managed to do.
Well,
so you haven't managed to get an election. You've lost quite a few MPs. What have you actually achieved from proroguing Parliament? What I'm getting to now is the politics of it and the advice.
Well, I'd say two things. The first thing is that, as we discussed earlier, it was well understood that this was something that, according to conventional understandings of the law, we have a new understanding of the law.
Yeah, but what did you gain from doing it?
Justin, this is the 7th time that you've interrupted me in the middle of a sentence. Now,
just answer the question. You're perfectly capable of answering. What did you gain?
I am trying to answer the question, but you're interrupting it at every point. But that's fair enough. That's your prerogative. But as the court sometimes said, sometimes people use their prerogative in a way which is not always appropriate. Anyway, what did we gain? What we gained was the opportunity to say that we have a domestic agenda which embraces investment in the NHS, investment in policing and crime, investment in education, and investment in infrastructure. Now, naturally, we want to make sure that we have a chance to fulfil that domestic agenda, and also we want to make sure that we can have an opportunity to honour the people's vote in 2016 to leave the European Union.
So is it still your intention to have a Queen's
17.4 million people voted to leave the European Union. We need to honour that. It's also the case that we've had the longest parliamentary session in hundreds of years. That had to come to an end. People acknowledged that it was appropriate for the Prime Minister and the government to say that this parliamentary session needs to be replaced with a new one. That was indeed what the Labour Party was calling for consistently. And in making sure that we bring forward a Queen's speech, we're seeking to ensure that the people's priorities in the areas that truly matter to them, on the health service, on education and on crime, are implemented.
Okay, so to get that Queen's speech, what, you have to go back to the Queen, do you, and ask for her to prorogue Parliament again?
We will, in due course, bring forward our proposals. I think that later today in the House of Commons, the Leader of the House of Commons will outline our approach in order to ensure that we can concentrate on that domestic agenda.
Right, so your intention, just to make this clear, you're intending to have a Queen's speech, and that will then require you to go back to the Queen, one can imagine a difficult conversation, and say to her, this time we're doing it for this reason, honestly.
Well, I think there are several things that need to be unpacked in that question. There are a number of assumptions there that require interrogation. The first thing is that you use the word honesty. There's no question in this judgment of impugning the Prime Minister or anyone else's motive. That's the first thing to say. So I think that the question of honesty, which you inserted into that question, is misplaced.
I'm not suggesting that the Queen was misled necessarily. No, I'm suggesting that the entire country was misled, which from the judgment of the judges is pretty clear.
No, it's not actually. One of the things that's clear from the judgment is that they think this decision was wrong in law, but they do not impugn the motives of the Prime Minister or anyone else in the judgment, and it's very, very important that we make that clear. The second thing that I think it's important to make clear is the government wants to have a strong domestic agenda. We want to bring forward a Queen's speech, but let's not get ahead of ourselves at this stage. Parliament is going to reconvene later today, and there'll be an opportunity for us to reflect on it. One of the points that you made, and indeed people like David Cork and others have made, is that in the wake of a judgment like this, it's appropriate that people should show a degree of humility. And I think that's enjoined on all of us, and it's a natural desire for people to say, right, well, what are you going to do now? I think after a judgment like this, we respectfully disagree with it, but we should also take some time to consider its ramifications.
So when this government goes to the Commons, hang on a second, on the humility issue, on the humility issue, will the government apologise to the Commons? Will the government apologise for what's happened?
I think it's only right for the government and for all of us to reflect on this judgment. And also, I don't think that the government should apologise for having a strong domestic agenda. I don't think we should apologise also for seeking to advance our exit from the European Union. I don't think the government should apologise also for saying that we're attempting to honour the democratic will of the British people. And of course, if people feel that the government is doing the wrong thing, then there is an option open to Parliament, and that option is to call a general election and to allow the people to decide. They are the ultimate sovereigns in our democracy.
Michael Gove, thank you very much.